really good stuff in our community. So welcome, join us, and you can also send questions and comments in the notes and on the post. So send us. But I already got some really good questions from the audience and some folks that have been sending notes, and we're still waiting to get one of our panelists to join the live stream. So just bear with me, and we're almost there. And I'm excited to have everyone. So I will be connecting and checking the comments that you guys are making. So just bear with me for a few more seconds and see if we can get Yolanda to join us also in the live stream. Thank you, guys. So while we wait for Yolanda to join us, I would like to introduce one of our speakers today that is going to be talking about mobility. And the way that I actually came around this speaker was because not long ago in one of my meet and greets, we talked about designated bike lanes and safety for pedestrians. And a big part for me and my sustainability plan is how we're going to modernize our streets and how we're going to include a broader concept of complete streets for what some of us understand those are. And I made a post in Twitter, and I talked about how some small businesses have a lot of animosity around having bike lanes because they believe it's going to destroy their small businesses. So through that conversation, I got connected through Michael, who I'm very grateful that he is speaking to us today, and he took the time to talk to us about who he is and what he's doing to make our city more pedestrian friendly. So I'm gonna let him introduce himself. And again, I hope that you guys have questions or comments, and you can post them on the chat. But Michael, I'm going to loop you in, and I hope that you can share with us who you are and how you got here, and a little bit of the story of why this matters to you so much.
Sure, be happy to explain that. So I am born and raised here in Los Angeles. I grew up in West Los Angeles, and I am a recovering car addict. I was at the DMV at 8 a.m. on my 16th birthday getting my driver's license. I couldn't wait, and I was pretty addicted to driving cars a little bit too fast around our streets for about 15 years. In my case, what changed was the financial crisis of 2010, 2011, kind of at the peak of the financial crisis. I had to give up my car and figure out another way to get around town. And I challenged myself to see if I could go just 1 mile on my bicycle without getting killed. And I really enjoyed it. And so then I went 2 miles, and then 3 miles, and then 5 miles. And ultimately, I went completely car-free and just got around Los Angeles by bicycle. It is possible. Everyone thinks it's not, but it is. And what I discovered along the way is a few things. Number one, the bicycle is a much more efficient way for someone to move. If you think about the space a car takes up versus a bicycle, just in terms of our road space, you can get a lot more people through the same amount of space by bike. To put it a different way, if 10% of people got out of their cars and on bikes in Los Angeles, you wouldn't have any traffic. So there's a lot of benefits. I was often meeting my friends and getting there in the same amount of time, even though I was biking and they were driving because of traffic. I never had to look for parking. I was never late if it was rush hour. In fact, I would be faster than cars in rush hour. I wasn't contributing to climate change. and I felt good physically and mentally. So there's just a lot of benefits. The downsides are our streets in Los Angeles are mostly designed around the car. We have a very strong car culture, as everybody knows. And so when my wife and I eventually had kids, and I started taking my kids around on the bike with me, there's a whole different level of anxiety and also of anger when the streets are unsafe and where cars pass you too closely and stuff like that. So I decided to do something about it. And I started a nonprofit called Streets for All. It's streetsforall.org. And anybody that's interested can go and take a look. The logo looks like that. And the point of Streets for All is not trying to get rid of cars or just say everybody should be on a bike. The point is to redistribute the space in our streets in an equitable way. So you can get from point A to point B safely regardless of your mode of transportation. If someone cannot afford a car, can only afford a bicycle, or can only afford the bus, or can only afford to walk, they shouldn't be less safe, or it shouldn't be much less reliable for them to get to where they need to go just because they can't afford a car. Today, our buses crawl in traffic. There's very few dedicated bus lanes. That's the single biggest change we can make. It just takes paint. We could stripe dedicated bus lanes all over the city, and immediately the bus becomes a very attractive option to many people that would never consider it. We could build protected bike lanes all over the city, and people that are too scared today to do it might decide to try. Also, scooters can use those same lanes, take the same width. And there's a lot we could do to make walking more appealing, including shade, bulb outs, making intersections safer, leading pedestrian indicators, those things where the walk signal goes on before the car light actually turns, are great. So there's a lot we could do. We live in a place that has near perfect year-round weather to be outside, and we live in a place that has a relatively flat topography. And we have a mayor that says he wants to be a leader in the Green New Deal. So all of that together, we should be a cycling paradise, not a cycling hell. And that's what I'm trying to do, trying to make the streets more equitable for everybody.
Awesome, thank you. And I guess I love this story that I saw somewhere about you, that you give up your car, and you just also kind of shared a little bit about that with us. And what do you say to Angelinos that, or a lot of us that are so dependent on cars and that believe that, you know, taking public transportation is dangerous, or that is unreliable, that it takes too long? What do you say to those folks?
A few things. Number one, 50% of the trips in LA County are 3 miles or under. So you may think you need to drive to the supermarket to get some eggs or some milk, but you don't. That's just what people are used to. You may think you need to go, whether it's the dry cleaners or a gym or a park or whatever, you often drive when you may not need to drive. But let's say you need to drive. I agree with you. I think the buses are very unreliable. And we need to change that. The bus should go faster than a car, not slower. The bus should get priority at intersections and should have its own lane, not have to share a traffic lane with private automobiles. Because the bus, A, it's more equitable. The bus is far cheaper than owning a car. And B, if you give a bus its own lane, it's going to move far faster at rush hour and become a more attractive option for people. So if we did that, we could also increase, or I should say decrease headways, so the bus comes quicker and more often. And if you give buses their own lanes and make the buses come a little bit more frequently, it would transform the city. You would have 10, 20% of people not drive again because the bus actually is faster for them.
And I mean, we see that in a lot of cities. We see a lot of that progress. And I mean, I'm from Colombia, and that's the kind of system that we have. We have designated, not just bus lane, but mobility.
Bus rapid transit. Colombia is very good at it.
In Colombia, excuse me, we have bus rapid transit, and now we're moving to trains and other more like mass transit forms of transportation. But every time I talk to people about, designated bus lanes, I feel like I generate an amount of hate that I just don't see very often. People don't want to get off their cars, and people think that's going to cause more traffic, and that's going to be such a hassle. What do we say to those folks?
Well, we need to look at other examples around the world. We're not unique. Everybody thinks that Los Angeles is a city that can never change, or that somehow we're unique and more addicted to cars than other cities, but it's not true. So if you look at international examples, you take cities like Amsterdam, that is one of the most cycle-friendly cities in the world today. It wasn't in the 70s. In the 70s, Amsterdam was digging up their streets, making more space for cars, building highways through their cities, taking away bike lanes. And somehow what happened was actually kids were getting hit going to school by cars, and the population demanded change. And they've had decades to go away from car culture and go a different direction. It takes leadership. I know it's not easy. A car is comfortable. So let's assume you can afford a car, because we're not talking about the equity aspect of this, of the people that can't even afford cars. But let's say you can afford a car. To be able to get in a car, have air conditioning, have your own space, have your own music, get it directly from point A to point B, it's very convenient. And I drive sometimes. My wife and I share a car. I know what it's like. It's very nice. However, the big picture here is a few things. Number one, the problem's just going to get worse. The more people that live in Los Angeles, the more traffic there is going to be, the worse our air is going to be. We have one of the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country, so anyone that's a parent should care about that. Did you know that just you smoked 4.2 cigarettes today? And so did I.
Well, because of all the car traffic and such.
You and I and everybody listening, if they're in Los Angeles, smoked 4.2 cigarettes just by breathing. So this is a public health emergency. I understand that people like their cars and don't want to change, but I believe that if you give people safe and attractive and reliable options that are not cars, some percentage of people will take them. And we don't need 100% of the city to stop driving. If 5% of the city switched to the bus or a bike instead of a car, you would see a dramatic difference.
And one of the things that I think is worth, and I'm so sad that Yolanda hasn't been able to join us for some reason on the live stream. But one of the things that I think is interesting to mention is that a lot of low-income folks in Los Angeles take public transit. A lot of families in my district, in District 10, can afford a car, believe it or not. A lot of seniors take cars, take buses, or take public transit. One of the advocates that we want to have on the live stream, she does it often too. So I think that when you mention the part of equity, we can't forget that having a car is a luxury. I lived in, like, when I first moved to this country 25 years ago, my family and I went to New York, and I didn't own a car until more than a decade ago when I moved to LA. I never ever drove a car ever in my life, or owned a car.
It's great.
Yeah. So
there's a huge equity aspect to this. If you can't afford a car, why should you have to be late for your job, or even your second job, because you're probably working really hard and long to survive, just because you have to take the bus? Why should you be penalized when all the space is given to cars and buses don't have their own lanes? Why should most of our tax money go towards roads that you don't get the benefit of because you're not driving a car? It's a huge equity issue. And in LA, buses have a stigma. But aside from, we could talk about safety and the pleasantness of the bus. But the bottom line is, if the bus was more reliable than a car, people would take it. And I can tell you, if you look at my Twitter feed, pinned to the very top of my Twitter feed, there's a video I took on Santa Monica Boulevard at rush hour. I'm on a bike and I'm flying past cars stopped in traffic. No one likes being in traffic. If there's a bus on Flower Street right now that you probably have heard about, that was a pilot program that will hopefully become permanent, and Metro has a dedicated bus lane and is running 70 buses per hour. That's more than one per minute. If all the major arteries in Los Angeles had a dedicated bus lane and a bus every minute, I promise you most people wouldn't drive, because the bus would just be way more convenient.
Right. Absolutely. And so one of the cases that comes to mind most, and this is not actually around public transit. We have we have invested a lot of money. The voters actually said we want to invest in our public transit, so we see more and more trains being built. I think that we need a combination. LA is very vast, so bike lanes. I'm sorry, bike designated bus lanes are not the only option. I think we can explore a lot of different options, including trains. What do we say to neighbors, for example, in my area, where they have said, we're going to fight to the teeth to not allow the train to come close to this neighborhood because it's going to destroy our neighborhood.
That's
And
an old argument.
I have two pieces of that in my own universe, in my own area here in Mid City, which is, I have a neighbor that said to me, we're going to fight to the teeth and this is never going to get done. And I have another neighbor that came to me. I do a meet and greets depending on what issues. And last time we talked about parks, and we had some experts that showed us where we can have parks and such. And one of my voters came to our meet and greet, and he said, I don't understand why we don't have more trains and why they don't come to our neighborhood. So what do we say to people that believe that trains and bike or bus designated by any type of public transit coming their way is going to bring, unsafe situations, or sadly more unsheltered folks are going to come? What do we say to that? Specifically to LA, because we're not talking about Chicago or New York. We're talking about what's happening here.
We say we've heard this story before. So first of all, I don't know if you or anyone that's listening is aware of this, but LA in the 1920s had the largest urban rail system in the world.
Mm-hmm.
In the world. And what we did over decades, and it ended in the 60s, is we dismantled this system and we gave most of the space to cars. But anytime you're in Los Angeles and you're driving or walking or biking and you see a very wide grassy median on a street, that's because there used to be a streetcar there. So San Vicente Boulevard, which I think is not far from you, for example, used to have a streetcar running in the middle. Venice Boulevard used to have a streetcar running in the middle. Santa Monica Boulevard, and many other examples. So people that say they want to preserve the historic integrity of their neighborhood, right now in Eagle Rock, there's a big fight over BRT on Colorado Boulevard that used to have a streetcar in the middle. They should look at the past. I'm all for preserving the historical integrity if it means we get to restore the past and put streetcars back. The second thing is we should look at facts, and I'll tell you a very personal story. My father is an attorney, and my parents live in the same house I grew up in Rancho Park in West Los Angeles, right where the Expo line goes. And before the Expo line was built, they had a big sign in their yard that said, "No way" on this train. It was a big Expo with a cross through it, and they were fighting against the Expo line because of all the things you just said. They were worried it would bring more traffic, potentially more crime, more noise, you name it. Since the train is opened, my father, who's an attorney and needs to go downtown to court a lot, has never driven downtown. He loves the train. He walks to it in 5 minutes, he gets on, and he's in downtown in about 25 minutes without ever worrying about traffic. So I guess what I would say is people not wanting change and being scared of change is as old as the hills. It's always happened. But we have to look even precedents in Los Angeles. The Expo line has not led to more crime in Rancho Park and the parts it goes through in West LA and Culver City, et cetera. It has not led to more homelessness and people traveling or whatever people think. It has reduced car trips on the 10 because people can now get on the train and go to Santa Monica or to downtown without having to drive. So this argument is, like I said, very old, very tired, very common. And that's where we need leadership. That's where I think our city council and our mayor, we don't do a good enough job marketing this stuff. We don't do a good enough job leading. As Henry Ford said, if he had asked people while he was working on the car, what did they want? They would have said a faster horse. It took leadership to change, and it's going to take leadership to change again.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really good point that you're making, because sadly we don't have enough. So there is and as an organizer that I am, I think we both see two pieces coming. We see like the bottom up of like folks in the community advocating for this, and we see also leadership happening. And I think the way that our political process works is that if we don't speak up and demand the things that we want to do, we don't really get them.
The other thing I wanted to address of what you said, though, is you said people are worried that they could lose business. Let's say there's a bike lane. They're worried that if there's a bike lane,
the community believes that, yeah.
And there are so many case studies from all over the world, and I'm going to give you one here in LA that really show that's not true. Business actually increases because most small businesses rely on locals, people that would walk to a restaurant or a coffee shop or dry cleaners or whatever, as opposed to people, driving 10 miles across the city to go to your location. So if local traffic is the bread and butter of a small business, you need to make it easiest for local people to get in and out. So bike lanes actually make it easier for people to get in and out. The reason why more people don't bike in LA is they're scared of the streets. There's not enough infrastructure, but they would do it more. I know a lot of people that won't come and visit me. My house is off of Melrose at certain times of the day because they don't want to deal with parking. It's too hard to park. So actually, if you're a small business on a street that has clogged traffic and it's just a traffic sewer, you're probably losing business because people don't want to deal with the parking. That's not an issue with biking. I want to tell everybody about Virgil. Virgil is in East Hollywood. It's a street that connects with Santa Monica Boulevard, Melrose, and then goes further south. This is a street that used to have 6 lanes. It was 2 parking lanes and 4 lanes of traffic. And they did a road reconfiguration, and they added a center turn lane, which didn't exist before, and they reduced the traffic lanes to 1 in each direction. It's called a 4-3 reconfiguration, 4 lanes to 3. And since then, if you go there, there's now a restaurant that's doing very well with tables and chairs outside. It's much more pleasant. There is a little market that came up. There's a new cafe. It's actually revitalized the area. And people don't enjoy walking on a street or biking on a street or sitting outside at a restaurant or a coffee shop when all they're doing is breathing in car fumes and listening to honking horns. You have to create a safe and enjoyable environment, and Virgil is a really good example of that.
And another example that I want to mention is our neighboring city of Culver City, where I got the chance to visit Mayor's Megan home, and she has this incredible picture, wall-to-wall, enormous, of Culver City in the 50s, or even before. I think it could have been the 30s or the 40s, where it was all cars, and you can see the cars and some of the railroad, and how it's today. And she was explaining that it was a struggle at the beginning with community members and other people, but it has revitalized the downtown area of Culver City so much. Moving the parking and having more pedestrian space and having bike lanes has really, really revitalized the area a lot. And I mean, one of the things that I miss the most coming from a small town, in Colombia, is this sense of community. And, I live right next to Pico, and I walk around, and at 8 p.m., it's dead zone. Like, you don't see anyone on the street. There's nobody walking or there's no sense of that I can go out there and walk around and say hello to my neighbors and get ice cream or anything like that. And I think that this is the promise that revitalizing our streets and modernizing them and including more mobility can offer.
It's interesting. Americans travel to different places. Maybe they go to Europe, maybe they go to Colombia, maybe they go to towns in Mexico. and they sit in these plazas and these public places that other parts of the world create a lot, and they love it. They love how quaint it is. They love how much it feels like a community. They love kind of the buzz of people versus traffic. But then they come back to LA and assume that nothing can change here, and that these places just have something different that LA doesn't have, and that we can't possibly build a plaza in the middle of a street because
Right.
that's crazy, or we can't
Because that's
possibly.
gonna take cars off the street, and God forbid we do that.
Everybody thinks that if you take cars off the street, something terrible is going to happen to the city and it's just going to be impossible. I don't know. But there's also the concept, I don't know if everyone is familiar with this, called induced demand. Induced demand is the concept that the more space you allocate to cars, the more cars are going to come. And the inverse is true. The city just spent $1.2 billion adding a lane on the 405 in each direction. And traffic is now worse than it was before they started the project. So what's the solution now? We're going to do 2 lanes on the 405. We're going to double deck the 405. We're going to expand Pico and Wilshire and Olympic. There isn't enough space. So until someone comes to me with a solution that's not buses and biking and walking and scooting and says, here's the solution for climate change. Here's the solution for in 20 years when LA County has 500,000 or a million more people living in it, how we're going to get around and have a quality of life. Until someone shows me how that's going to happen with cars, it has to change. And the truth is, it is changing all around us, just not in LA. New York, in the last 10 years, has dramatically changed their streets, and they have less space to work with than we do. But they've added many more plazas. They've added a network of bus lanes and bike lanes. 14th Street in New York, as of a few weeks ago, is bus only. So you can read about that. San Francisco just approved a $600 million project on Market Street, which is the equivalent of our Wilshire Boulevard, to make it pedestrians, bikes, and public transit only, no private cars. All around the world, and that's just in the US, that Europe's doing even more dramatic things. In Paris, the mayor wants to make the center of Paris car-free completely.
And I know that we have to wrap up soon because I'm trying to get Yolanda to join us, and she hasn't been able. And one of the things that I want to talk about is complete streets. And a big piece of my platform is obviously creating jobs. You know, the average household in my district make about $47,000 a year. There's a lot of people living with their parents because they can't afford rent. And that's a whole other live stream that we're going to have next week, where we're going to talk about gentrification and housing. So join us next Tuesday if you want to learn more about gentrification and housing. But how we can, first, what are complete streets? And in my opinion, it's a brilliant idea because it's very labor heavy. So for us that really support the labor movement, this also can bring a lot of jobs that are actually green jobs. People don't think that fixing your sidewalks, planting more trees, fixing your street, making it maybe more pedestrian friendly, making more lanes that are designed for buses or such, if that's where we're headed, are labor heavy. So tell us a little bit about what is the vision. I have a very strong vision about what I want to see in my district. But what are complete streets, as LA has been talking about it?
A complete street is a street that serves all modes of transportation. So typically that would be a lane, or depending on the width, 2 lanes for cars. It would be a dedicated bus lane. It would be a protected bike lane, and it would be a generous sidewalk with shade trees, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and how, for example, what would be an example of a complete street in Los Angeles?
That's a great question.
Because I hear a lot of contests that they have sent out to the community. I have gotten some of those emails saying, please complete to have a complete street in your neighborhood. So I don't know if there are a lot of complete streets in LA.
I'm racking my brain. I can't think of a single complete street in Los Angeles. So Spring Street downtown has a 2-way protected bike lane, but it doesn't have a bus lane. Flower Street has a bus lane, but I don't think it has a bike lane. I can't think of a single street in Los Angeles off the top of my head, and I pay attention a lot to this stuff, that is actually a complete street. Los Angeles loves to pay lip service to this stuff, but our current city council and even our mayor, unfortunately, are too scared of people that drive to make real change.
Yeah, and you know, as someone that has worked on environmental issues her whole life, and as someone that is really committed to not just not just reducing greenhouse gas emissions, as you said, we're smoking a bunch of cigarettes without ever lighting one cigarette in our lives. We're like literally doing that right now because of the pollution. LA has the worst air quality since 1979. So we have never complied with the Clean Air Act, for example. So all of those issues, and also that this can be an avenue for more jobs. This can save you money. Like for me, I dream with the moment where I can go to a meeting, I can sit with my book or with my notes, or write the things that I need to say or such in when I participate on speaking in public, and I don't have to worry about driving myself, because I feel like always it's so wasteful when I'm like driving somewhere where we all go into an event and we all drive in one car, and it just feels almost so unfair that it's only one person in one car, where we could be potentially carpooling, or like you said, or biking. Or in New York, I had a little scooter, so that was my medium of transportation, plus the subway and you know, and the bus and other things that are in a busy as New York is, and as you know, small, they had always this, you know, designated bike lane. So this is definitely something that I want to hear from folks. So I want to say thank you to you. Thank you so much for talking to us and for bringing us the solutions and some of the concerns. We will be following your progress via your Twitter or your social media. So please share that with us again. If
Sounds
you can,
good.
please, yeah. And we will talk with you very soon. You know, my plan as a candidate and as someone that really cares deeply about this issue, is to try to find communality and bringing people together where people really want to see these changes happening in our communities. I personally want my complete street in my mind is to have places where we don't have enough tree canopy, where it gets really hot in my community. In the summer, sometimes it gets really hard because we don't have enough tree canopy. So modernizing our streets by planting more trees, by fixing the sidewalks. Can we fix our sidewalks, please? Who says amen? And with that, also having mobility lanes that are included and that make sense for people. And I think that as we get more educated about this topic, I think people are going to come around, and I think it's our job to educate small businesses, people in our community, and to help them understand that this is necessary.
I agree with everything you just said. Pico is actually a designated great street by the mayor.
Yeah.
And yet, very minimal improvements, some bulb outs at right turns, and maybe some trees, but it's been very, very minimal. So I think it's not a great street yet. It needs to be great.
Yeah, and last week, sadly, we experienced such a tragedy with one of our little neighbors here in Koreatown, which she was on a crossing the street, actually going to school, and got hit by a car and passed away. So our prayers and our thoughts are going to her family, but also I think we need to move beyond thoughts and prayers at this point, and really get the community to organize and to work together so that we can best, you know, avoid these things. These things are avoidable.
I agree.
Thank you so much, Michael. And we will talk to you very soon again. And
okay,
if I get
good luck with your campaign.
Thank you. And if you see more questions on social media, please join the conversation and answer them there, and we will continue the conversation there.
Happy to.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you very soon.
Bye-bye.
So now I'm waiting to get Yolanda Overstreet, who is going to join us, and she's a community advocate for mobility here in the West Adams area. And she will be sharing with us a little bit of her journey on how she became a bike advocate, why she loves biking, and what are some of the issues and the conversations that she encounters every day with people that that bike in our city. So I'm just waiting for her to join us and to join the green room so that we can bring her in. And I don't know, but if you guys want to have some questions, or if you guys have any questions, please. I'm keeping an eye on the chat room here, and I see the folks that are talking about Virgil. Let's see what are people saying on social media. Let me see what's going on here, guys. Okay, so I have. Let's see. I really enjoy it. I agree. I agree with bringing streetcars back to LA and complete streets. So somebody said that in my chat right now. There are some other people watching. People are asking if I could fix the audio, but if you can give me more details, I can try that. But I have a headset, so I'm not sure how to fix the audio. We're still waiting for Yolanda to join us. So let me see what are other folks saying on Twitter. Okay, so something interesting that I got, actually a comment that I want to share, and I was waiting for Yolanda to join us to talk more about this topic, is that I have heard this twice, actually. I have heard it from other folks, but so this is a comment that somebody made. So they said, what about people that walk and drive bicycles? These people don't have education, and that's why we have these accidents so many times. But as drivers, we have driver's licenses. This is the second time I hear this argument. And we're like educated by bicycle, bike riders, people that walk, and scooters just drive and walk and never pay attention. And same walkers cross the street looking at their cell phones, and they need a license plate. So how are we making this possible? How are we gonna protect pedestrians, and should we give them a driver's license? And that's an interesting post. I think that our city has been designed for cars. I actually, at some point, as Michael shared earlier, our city was designed for something else. Was designed for public transit until the tire lobby came and kind of changed the game at some point in history. So we also have a fossil fuel industry that is making millions and millions of dollars at the expense of you and I, because now we depend on cars to do things. And sadly, even though we enjoy them, and as someone that enjoys nature and drives around to go to the mountains and to go hiking and rivers and see the desert, also understand that I need a car. But also we have become reliable, and we need cars nowadays that can take us places and such. So how do we envision a world where maybe we have less cars, maybe we don't use them as often, maybe they do become a luxury that we can use when we need them and not necessarily all the time, and maybe we can bus and take the train to work. And when we do our errands, that's when we utilize our cars. But I do envision a world where we don't have any pollution. The majority of our children, Latino and African Americans, suffer from asthma. and that's a real issue in our community. That's a huge problem in our community that needs to be addressed. And unless we take this issue very seriously and we all take part of the solution and try to figure it out, how are we gonna tackle this problem of pollution? How are we gonna save people's lives? You know, every month I hear somebody in my district that got hit by a car, that we need to organize a vigil. That's, I mean, our little Alexa that just passed, which is very sad to hear that a life was lost when it could have been prevented. And, you know, what are the current things that we can do that maybe we need better signage, maybe we need more lighting, maybe we need more education, maybe we need to start brights on red, maybe, I mean, there are so many options that we have and so many things that we need to discuss as a community and see what works for us, and maybe not what works for you know, for cars, but what is it that is going to make us a much more thriving community. And I mean, I'm all for, you know, public transit that we can take that is reliable and that is safe and that is going to take us places at the time in a good timing. We have heard stories about bike lanes and such where the community have come up in arms, and there are council members in this city that have been threatened their lives because of their idea of maybe have more mobility or bike lanes. And I'm still waiting for Yolanda to join the live stream. I think she's having some technical difficulties, and she can speak more about this topic of biking and people of color. I think that this is important, and constantly the rhetoric from some small businesses about bikes are going to destroy our business, which I think is an idea that we should talk about and that we should challenge. And there are plenty of research from all around the world, and actually from here, from the United States, where that doesn't happen. Not long ago in one of my meet and greets, we have somebody that came and posted that question about, you know, about having not designated bike lanes only, but protected bike lanes, which will save people's lives. And how in the same room, somebody said to me, you will never be an elected official if you take that on. And how somebody else said, actually, in my neighborhood in Venice, things are going actually really well, and there was a lot of animosity around getting the protected bike lanes established. So I really hope that Yolanda can join us if she can, and hopefully she can share a little more about what her campaigns are about, and what are some of the things that she offers, and how her community here in West Adams takes on the challenges of wanting to maybe go around on the bicycle, how other people are utilizing biking to get more, you know, show more of our neighborhood around to other guests and other people. And what are the stigma around bike lanes and bus lanes and all of the things that will kind of ask us to get out of our cars. So I want to hear from you, from folks that are watching. I know that there are a few of you listening to this topic. So if you can send a message and here on social media, let us know what you think and what are the questions that you have. So I'm going to go in the, let's see if I can check some other questions that I have. So one of the questions that I have is, what are some of the solutions that you see for complete streets? And what can the community do to organize around this issue? So Number one, I think that we definitely need to participate in that complete Gray Streets challenge. I think all of us should talk to our neighbors and see how we can do that. As a candidate, I am committed to figure it out how to bring resources to make our streets better and more pedestrian friendly and just more friendly for everyone. How do we organize and how do we get our community to empower our community to work on these issues? So number one, we need to talk to our neighbors and ask them what they think about our streets and how we can make them better. And one second, I'm responding here. And the other thing besides talking to our neighbors is to plan and to envision what we want to see on our streets. What kind of city we want to be. And in that sense, are we going to be the city that we're going to leave the legacy to our kids that we can, we're in the second largest city in the country, we don't have really good public transportation, and that's changing. Are we going to be the city that is going to have the highest rate of people killed because they're biking? Everybody should have the right to bike and bike in a safe space. So I think that that's the second thing that we need to figure it out. Where are we headed, and where are we headed as a city, as a community? LA, as the second largest city in the country, needs to figure it out. What are we going to do with our public transportation? And I think that community input is extremely important. We need to talk to our neighbors. We need to get out and vote for good people that represent our interests and that care about this issue. We need to hold other elected officials accountable that maybe are not doing enough, or as we heard from Mike, Michael believes that nearly we're not doing enough. So what are some of the things that we can do to make this possible? So you can reach out to me. You can go to auda2020.com, and if you want to volunteer for us, we're here for you. We want to organize with more public transit. We want more trees. We want better sidewalks and better streets. We want more streets that are well lit so that we can be more safe. And safety is very important, not just to pedestrians, but for everyone. So if you want to join, don't forget, you can go to auda2020.com, and we're here for you. I believe Yolanda is not going to be able to join us because she's having lots of technical difficulties, but we will try to get her next time here with us. So I am going to end the live stream a little earlier because sadly one of my guests couldn't join, and technology wasn't really being friendly to her right now. So thank you all so much for the support and for the love and for joining. And if you feel that this was helpful, please share it with your contacts. Please share in your social media and let us know any questions that you have. And for more questions and more suggestions, you can always go to auda2020.com and check my platform, my vision, and also reach out to us. I'm always here for you to answer your questions. Thank you. Thank you so much for partake. And next week, we're going to be talking about gentrification and housing with one of UCLA lecturers. So she's going to talk a lot about good stuff. So thank you so much for all the support and the love. And again, Auda2020, let me see if I can point to this. Auda2020.com is here on the screen. Wait, right here. So you can go to my website and support us in any way you can. All your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much, and you have an amazing afternoon. Bye-bye.